Welcome to Born on the Bayou Sports, a Houston sports show made for Houstonians by Houstonians. Join Tim Costello and Scott Barzilla every week as they break down the latest in Houston Astros, Rockets, and Texans news. Tim's a former minor league broadcaster, and Scott has written 2 books on the Baseball Hall of Fame. Yeah, if Javier could get it figured out, it would make things a lot easier because he was that guy everybody was counting on this year to be a Cy Young candidate, take that big step forward and help anchor this rotation with Fromber.
Since he's come to Houston, you can look at the development of guys like Carlos Correa defensively, Jeremy Pena defensively. I mean, you can Alex Bregman's, certainly I think a better than average third baseman.
And now you're putting teams in 3rd and 8, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 9. Now here comes Will Anderson. Pin back your ears, let's go. So if you're Bayou born and bred, or just like spending time in the H, sit down, relax, and stay Houston strong. Welcome back in Born on the Bayou Sports. Tim Costello, Scott Barzilla coming to you hot here on a little bit of a colder Boxing Day, I guess they call it if you're British.
Yeah, I don't know if it's cold down here. It's definitely rainy.
Cold and rainy up here. Probably 50s and a little bit of rain. Kind of nasty weather. Had to turn around on the way to the golf course this morning. Never a good vibe, right? When you're feeling like you're about to go play golf and then it starts raining on you on the way there.
I did get to play on Monday for the first time in, I would say, several months. My semi-return, tough return to golf. You ever played over at Country Place / Pearland Country Club?
Yeah. We used to have district out there before it moved to Bay Forest, but when it's in good shape, it's a fun course.
Well, I have to say the greenskeeper needs a fresh coat of Sherwin-Williams for those greens. Maybe if they could paint in a couple of handicap spots, that would be kind of good. Yeah, they had 3 temporary greens on the back 9, so that's never a fun time.
Not what you're looking for. Speaking of not what you're looking for, I have to think, Scott, the Christmas games was not what the NFL was looking for. It was a subpar product. And I want to know, as our starting question this week, do you think the NFL right now is devaluing their product by having to always play on the big holidays? And essentially you force certain teams to play 3 games in 11 days. For the Chiefs, it was 3 games in 10 days. And both Netflix games were shitty.
Yeah, and I guess it depends. I mean, they pulled over 30 million, 30 million people watching. So I guess it's from an NFL perspective, it's like, yeah, we got people watching, but question is how much longer will they watch?
And that's my thought, right? Are you devaluing your product, right? That was not good football. And we'll get into the Texans. We'll get into the Texans aspect of it later on. But just all in all, right? Like the Steelers looked not great. The Chiefs didn't, look fantastic. The Ravens didn't have to do a ton because of how bad the Texans looked. And I got to be honest with you, I didn't even watch the night game because the 2 Netflix games were so bad. I was just over it.
Tonight's game? Yeah, I haven't watched tonight's game.
I didn't watch. No, there was a night game on Christmas Day too. I didn't watch that one. And then I have no desire to watch football tonight after you put 3 games on yesterday. And so, I feel like the product is being devalued. Part of what made football great was that you look forward to it all week. It's such a violent game. It gave people an opportunity to rest. But you look at let's look at the Steelers scenario. Before this stretch, they were in first place at 10-3. They now lost 3 games in 11 days, and they're fighting for a playoff spot. Now, obviously, if you win, no issues. But at the end of the day, 3 games in 11 days is still outrageous.
No, I think they're in, but yeah, it's. I think in the Thursday night games this year, I think have been better than the ones last year. I think the ones last year were particularly awful. But the thing is, when you play 4 days after a game, the chances of one of those teams just physically not being ready is much higher. And then the chances that both teams will not physically be ready, you just have really incredibly bad football. We've seen that how many times on Thursday nights, just in general.
And then let's move it up a day. Let's move it up to Wednesday. Now I understand like the teams that played Wednesday played Saturday the week before, but now their week before game was rushed because they're playing Saturday instead of Sunday. And then let's not even look like then there's the emotional turmoil of what happened to the Texans on Saturday, and we'll get into that. But all of that lends itself rather to bad football.
Well, and I think from a Texans perspective, coming into the season, who are your top two teams in the AFC?
Two of the three of the Chiefs, the Ravens, and the Bills, take two of those three. Really take the Chiefs and then one of the two Ravens or Bills, right?
I don't think anybody thought the Bills were going to be this good coming into the season. Because you take Stephon Diggs off their team, and some people are thinking, oh, they're going to take a step back. So pretty much it's the Ravens and the Chiefs. And so not only do you play 2 games in 11 days, you play games in 11 days against arguably the two best teams in the NFL.
Yeah, and let's transition to that Kansas City game, right? Because that was the first one you played on a Saturday. Again, you're playing that one on 5 days rest instead of 6. Say what you want there. That was a pretty neck and neck game until disaster struck, right? And that was what we're talking about is the Tank Dell injury, where that's a life-altering injury on a freak play where you've got a practice squad guy on his first game day roster trying to make an impact any way he can, diving for a football. Tank Dell makes an unbelievable touchdown catch, and it might be the last play he's ever played in his career.
Yeah, and what's funny is how that news trickled out. Because we saw the injury, everybody knew it was bad, but then the first reports were it's a dislocated kneecap. You're like, that sounds bad, but that's recoverable. Then you hear torn ACL. That's like, that's not good, but
Makes sense, but with what we saw.
But that's recoverable. Maybe not by the beginning of 2025, but he could come back at some point in 2025, and then you hear torn MCL, and you're missing all of 2025,
And you
maybe
hear
career
PCL.
ending. Yeah, maybe career ending. I mean, he tore every ligament in that knee.
Yeah.
And dislocated the kneecap.
It was devastating. It was when they brought the card out that had the cover on it. I think that's when you knew it was really, really bad, right? When it wasn't just a regular cart, it was the one that shields you from the public eye. I think that's when I knew it was really bad. It just, I mean, it broke my heart. That would have been a game tying touchdown if the extra point gets made, and I'm not even celebrating it because, the Texan that I love more than anybody else is down on the field. I saw CJ's reaction. His reaction post game was gut wrenching. Everything he said since then is gut wrenching. And yeah, I feel like the win got taken out of the team's sails at that point, right? Because let's say Tank Dell doesn't get hurt, right? You score that touchdown. There's no long delay. Fairbairn probably doesn't miss the extra point.
Yeah.
And we're in a tie ball game where the defense is balling, right? Let's go.
Well, and what's really frustrating is that even taking the Jets game, this is the one game where it's like, this is the Tank Dell I remember from last year. He had it going. He had 5 catches for 90 plus yards, and we're in the third quarter. I mean, he had it going. I mean, that was a great play, a deep throw, one of those 50-50 balls that he comes down with. It was just
You kind of started to see him and CJ back on the same page, right? We're
Tank Dell,
best friends hooking up. The touchdown pass was like, where the hell is he throwing it? And then next, Tank Dell came down with it, right? Like, I didn't see anybody there, but Tank and CJ just knew. And yeah, it was devastating for the whole team, right? But I think collectively the whole city, and then even more so every University of Houston alumni out there, um, we were all gut wrenched, right? Like that's our guy. There is no better ambassador for the University of Houston at this point in time than Tank Dell. That man shows up for every big basketball game, every football game. He's a presence on campus. He's a presence in his community, and he plays for the hometown team. And again, wonderful guy, someone we've all rooted for. It's gut-wrenching to see him not be able to accomplish what we know he's capable of.
Yeah, and I think that that's really the key point is, and we'll get to this more on this later, but obviously this is a franchise changing trajectory play because now all of a sudden you don't have a number two wide receiver because Stephon Diggs is going to be a free agent. So where do you go to pick up your number two? Because we all know John Mechie isn't it. So who's your number two wide receiver? Do you draft that guy? Do you sign that guy? Do you re-sign Stephon Diggs? I mean, do you go out in free agency and maybe make a run at Jamar Chase? I mean, where do you go from here?
Can I make a crazy off-the-wall suggestion for you? What if the Texans traded up and drafted Travis Hunter? Go get yourself a nickel cornerback, a lockdown cornerback. Go get yourself a playmaking wide receiver. You limit the snaps on both sides. I don't know, man. That could be a crazy move.
I don't know that they have the capital to get into the top 5 of the draft.
Do you think he's going top 5?
Yeah, he's going top 5. He's going to be the first non-quarterback taken.
It would be sick if we could pull that off. I will say. I don't think it's going to happen, but I do agree with you that now wide receiver is a huge concern in the offseason versus if you had a healthy Tank Dell and a healthy Nico Collins going into the offseason, Stephon Diggs is a luxury again, just like he was this year, versus now you're like, well, shit, do we need to re-sign Diggs? Do we hit the free agency market? Do we spend a first-round pick potentially on a wide receiver? Do we go early second round? They brought in Deontay Johnson off waivers. He was not much of a factor, obviously, when you got a Wednesday game after a Saturday game. So you've got one regular season game and one playoff game, essentially, to see if Deontay Johnson is maybe a guy who meshes with your locker room. But, I mean, that's all down the road stuff. Looking at that game, I mean, what's so frustrating, Scott, is we were playing toe-to-toe with the back-to-back NFL champions and the referees, realistically.
Yeah, that was
we were right toe-to-toe with them, right? This defense was right there with them. And then that play just changed. And again, it was a one-score game, but you just couldn't get that stop. You couldn't get off the field. And then when you did, give CJ opportunities, he just looked defeated. He looked like a shell of himself, and I don't blame him. And it would have been nice, right, to say, like, that's my guy. I'm going to go out and I'm going to fucking ball out for him and do it, and that's what happened. But obviously it can go the other way of just, like, you're gutted and you can't find that fire, and that's unfortunately what we saw, it seemed like.
Yeah, and I think what's unfortunate is that when you look at this team, you kind of look at what could have been. I mean, this team ended up they got blown out by the Vikings. That was a legitimate blowout. But played the Lions close, should have won. Played the Packers close, should have won. We played, we beat the Bills. And we played toe-to-toe for most of that game. So there's only 2 games this year where they've gotten their doors blown off. And both of those teams.
Speaking of which, let's move on to the one where we did. Jingle bells, Batman smells. The Texans laid a fucking egg.
My God. Well, that game could have been 45-2. I mean, the Ravens took their foot off the gas in the second half. Once Lamar Jackson scored that, whatever the hell that play was. I mean, I don't know. And here, I hate to knock on DeMeco Ryans, but during that only drive, I was screaming twice, just take the 3 points. I mean, when we're on about the 30-yard line, just take the 3 points. Now, luckily, they bailed us out with a pass interference. They were down on, inside the goal line, inside the 5-yard line. Just take the 3 points. It's a 10-5 football game. It's a one-possession game at that point. And, here we go. It's a new game. But instead, we'll try and, we're going to do, this Bobby Slowick, whatever bullshit we do inside the 10-yard line that we always do. And it never works.
Yeah. I think the most telling thing was, after the game, Danielle Hunter called out the preparation, right? He literally said, like, we have to game plan better. Like, the most fixable thing was we got out game planned. And I don't necessarily know how much he's talking about the defense there, or if he's maybe calling Bobby Slowick out a little bit. Because, I mean, number one, this defense is beat up, right? You lost Jimmy Ward for the season. You didn't have Shire yesterday. You only had, 5 healthy defensive linemen in general. Your cornerbacks are banged up. Your offensive line is like, this was not a healthy team, but you still, at one point it was 10-5, right? This game was right there, and then the fucking dam just broke, and holy shit, did it get bad?
Well, it's 10-2 because they never took the 3
You're right. I'm sorry, 10-2.
Well, and here's what I wrote. Basically, I think there are some teams that you just don't match up well against, and the Ravens is that team for the Texans, because as a defense, I don't know, particularly when you're undermanned like we were, how do you stop Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry? How do you do it? And then the fact that they have better receivers this year than they've had in years past, with a healthy Mark Andrews and Flowers and Bateman.
And Likely.
How do you – I mean, I don't know, but
think about this. Like, think about this, really. Think what the Patriots did with 2 great tight ends before Aaron Hernandez started killing people, right? Like, they were fucking wrecking the league with 2 tight ends. You now have that level of production with Likely and Mark Andrews and now Lamar Jackson, right?
Well, but with Lamar Jackson, the thing is you got to have a linebacker spy him.
Correct.
And it's got to be your fastest linebacker.
But their 2 best receivers can be on the field in double tight sets. So with Derrick Henry on the field, so you literally have no idea what they're gonna do. They could line up with double tights, heavy formation, and you're like, okay, this is a Henry down, and next thing you know, Likely and Andrews are streaking down the field.
Well, and this game was a carbon copy of the playoff game last year, where really the defense held up for the most part in the first half of that playoff game. Christian Harris in particular made some plays, and he made some plays in this one. Will Anderson made some plays. Obviously, Lassiter with the safety. I was screaming at the top of my lungs at my parents' house, we're not getting shut out. We're not getting shut out. I mean, it was, but my God, this offense, I just don't. I could look at, let's say we play the Ravens in the postseason. I could look and see, okay, getting Shire back is going to be a really big boost, because now you've got 2 sideline to sideline linebackers that you can have on the field at all times. That doesn't even count Henry To'oTo'o. But your offense has got to score on this team. And I don't know, where are you going to get offense from, Tim?
Yeah. At this point, right, you have one legitimate NFL wide receiver, Nico Collins, who's a stud. But literally every coach in the other side's coaching staff is walking in the office saying, we're not going to let Nico Collins beat us this week. Someone else is going to have to beat us. And at the end of the day, that's what happened this week, right? Like, they put a ton of coverage on Nico Collins. It said, have at it, Robert Woods. Have at it, John Mechie. Have at it, Hutchinson. Like, literally anybody but Nico Collins is going to beat us. And Nico had a couple catches, 3 catches, 60-something yards probably. But at the end of the day, Nico was a non-factor in that game. They shut down the run, and Stroud was just bad. Stroud
Yeah,
was
that was just
bad with a
bad.
capital B. And again, I don't know how much of this is hangover to the fact that, his best friend has that happen to him, and then he has to get up there and answer questions about it. And he's trying to mentor and carry the wide receiver that dove into Tank's knee, right? There's just so much on this man's plate right now. But he was missing wide open throws. Like that game, like Schultz had, opportunity in the flat where if Stroud hits him, he's possibly in for 6, if not like down near the 5-3 yard line, right?
Yeah, there was like 3, 4, 5 yards over guys' heads. It was just, uh, it was Davis Mills esque from the Davis Mills era, and it's the first time. And he's laid some eggs. I mean, he laid some eggs against the Jets twice. He's had some bad football games, but that's the first time I've watched him, and I've openly asked the question: is he really the quarterback of the future for this team?
It's
And
an
I
honest
don't know.
question at that point. And I'm worried too. Some of the relationships that he's building in the city, he's going to these Dave Rubin white parties. He's spent the entire offseason touring the world, spreading football, going on podcasts, making appearances, building the brand that is CJ Stroud, right? And in a sense, I don't necessarily have an issue with that because he truly believes he is a vessel, and his job is to spread the word, and football gives him the opportunity to do so, right? Like he's one of those people, and I have no issue with that whatsoever. What I am going to say is if that's what you believe, you're not going to be given those opportunities if you suck, right? You're not going to be asked to come speak in front of people. You're not going to be asked to come to the Fellowship of Christian Athletes national symposium and give a speech there. You're not going to be asked to come to a church and speak because no one's going to know who you are if you flame out of the league, right? You have to find a way to be at the top of your game if you still want to be that guy who gets out there and spreads the word the way you want to. Like Tim Tebow was a flash of the pan. Like Tim Tebow didn't get to do what he wanted to do at that level because he just wasn't good enough.
Well, and I think there is some questions that I think we're just going to have to leave open for now. I think number one, is this a temporary problem for CJ Stroud? I mean, that's one we don't know. We don't know if it's based on what happened with Tank. We don't know if it's based on the fact that he's got happy feet based on a line that sucks. So we got to leave some things open. Number one is Bobby Slowick the offensive coordinator of this team moving forward after this season?
I think frustratingly so, yes. I think you're going to get a new offensive line coach, but I don't think he's going to get hired anywhere, and I don't think DeMeco's going to fire him.
Cody Stutes on his part on Houston football, he said that not only does Slowick need to be fired, but they need to move away from the West Coast system altogether. Well, if you do that, that's basically CJ Stroud starting over and learning a new offense. And so do you take a step back before you take a step forward if you do that?
Possibly, but I think if you go get one of those guys who's a known quarterback whisperer, you'll be okay, right? Like bring somebody in who works to CJ's strengths. Bring somebody in. Maybe it is an Eric Bieniemy. Maybe it's a Cliff Kingsbury type, or someone who maybe you go get the offensive coordinator from Ohio State. Maybe you go get that guy and bring him down here, and because he's worked with CJ before. I don't know, but Brian Hartline I would love to get that guy onto this roster. That guy, look at the talent that he produces year in and year out coming out of Ohio State at the wide receiver position. Would it be a big jump for him? Yeah, absolutely. But you've got a guy who knows CJ Stroud intimately, who understands the NFL because he was an NFL receiver. And you've got someone who can at least look at the talent level around CJ and say, okay, how are we going to use it best and scheme guys open? To me, that's the kind of hire I would look at. I understand you probably want someone more experienced. And what's frustrating to me is I feel like if we get rid of Slowick, the next hire we have is probably going to have the last name Kubiak.
Well, it could be that, or it could be just like Gerard Johnson gets elevated from
But
quarterback
that's
coach.
again, we're staying with the same shit. If
Yeah,
Gerard Johnson was that good, he would have been with CJ at his hip all off season, all whatever, and CJ would look fantastic this year. But I have to look at every coach on the offensive side and say you failed the quarterback this year. The play calling has been terrible. CJ, we are terrible in third and long, and we give our quarterback more third and longs than any team in the NFL. It's not even close. It's like we have 167 third and longs this year. The next team is at like 92.
yeah, that's bad. What I guess I'm driving at is what do they call it, the Kubistan offense, or whatever the combination of names that they throw together. Is that the best offense in general for Stroud? And if it is, then just getting somebody else who's calling plays, like, to me, if you're talking about thinking outside the box, is Case Keenum a name that you want to consider?
I wouldn't mind that. Like, at least Case understands the position a little bit more and knows Stroud. And Case has worked in a bunch of different offenses. I don't think the Kubiak offense is that great. I don't know if it's West Coast or zone read, whatever you want to call it, because I don't think we run a West Coast offense. I think we're a zone read offense. That's what this football team is predicated on, is tough, hard-nosed zone read running the football. We've been that way all of our fucking life except the Brian years. But at the end of the day, I think very few fans understand this offense better than the Houston Texans fans, because we've seen it for so long. And one of the things we were most excited about when Bill O'Brien came to town was he was like, "Oh, we're gonna be a game plan offense, right? Like we're gonna."
That.
It was bullshit, but it's what he told us, right? And we were all like, "Oh yeah," because Kubiak's calling card was like every play. The first play of the game was a play action left with a boot read to the right with a long shot to Andre, or an underneath route for Owen Daniels. That was everybody in the NFL knew that was the first play of the game. That was going to happen. And
Yeah.
so we were just excited for something different. And then we're right back to that same offense. And I don't think it's a very easy offense to shut down. The reason it works for the 49ers when it did is because of the talent level across the board. You had a Christian McCaffrey, you had a George Kittle, you had a Deebo Samuel, you had an Ayuk, and you had Jennings, all fantastic skill players at every single position. When you don't have that level of skill player production across the board, when you've got, John Mechie out there trying to make plays, when you've got Robert Woods out there making plays, when you've got Dalton Schultz instead of George Kittle, there's a difference. And the scheme matters a lot more at that point.
Yeah, I think, but more than anything, and I don't know what scheme this is, but listening in the morning show on 610, Seth Payne was talking about the fact this the number of times where you'll see on any one, say, a given play, 3 offensive linemen blocking 1 defensive lineman and 2 defensive linemen just running free for the quarterback. We need a system where it's like, you see that guy in front of you, block that guy. I mean, get in his way. Do something. I mean, there's too many times. And there's times when you get Kendrick Green get his ass beat. There's times when Kenyon Green got his ass beat. But there's also too many times where they're running seemingly simple stunts and nobody's picking the guy. I mean, they need something. I don't know if it's simplifying it. I don't know. I'm not smart enough to figure that out. But somebody's got to come in here and say, okay, forget about all this other bullshit. That guy in front of you, you block that guy. And then if you get him to the ground, you block the guy behind him. I mean, that's what needs to happen.
Here's where I'm at. There's 2 Hall of Fame former Houston Oilers who were amazing on the offensive line and have coaching/head coaching experience in Mike Munchak and Bruce Matthews.
Yeah.
Pick up the fucking phone. If Bruce Matthews and Mike Munchak don't get into that building at least for an interview, you failed.
You absolutely fail. Bruce doesn't even have to move. I know where he lives. I can hand deliver an invitation for an interview to Bruce Matthews' house in Sugarland. I've been there. Cameron was friends with Jake. I know exactly where Bruce lives. I'll get the invite to him. But if you do not interview Bruce Matthews, you're wrong, right? Like, you've got a Hall of Fame lineman with coaching experience for a line in the Tennessee Titans that fucking ran roughshod over the league with CJ2K. Like that.
Yeah.
That was a great line.
Yeah, Bob. I'm done with Bobby Slowick. I mean, that's basically all that amounts to. Who you replace him with at this point, what kind of offense you replace him with, whatever. But to me, the biggest problem is not really so much the offense and the way it's designed. To me, the big problem between this year and last year has been the play calling. I mean, especially when you get down the red zone, there's times when this offense looks great. Then you get inside the 20 and then we're running some kind of stupid, pitch play or, backwards pass or I don't know. So some kind of, going to the back of the playbook and finding whatever bullshit stagger Lee or whatever, play we could come up with. Just run the same shit that got you 60 yards previously on the drive.
I'm with you. Absolutely with you. And I just looked it up. Hartline is the co-offensive coordinator and wide receivers coach. So he does have offensive coordinator experience up at Ohio State. He's up to Chip Kelly, I think is the play caller, though, for Ohio State.
But in here, if you're in his case, if you gutted this whole staff and you offered him wide receivers coach, does he stay at Ohio State or does he want to come to the NFL and be a wide receivers coach?
I don't know. I think that's a tough call because I think he's got it made at Ohio State, right? Like, he just literally churns out first-round picks on a year-in, year-out basis. It's his alma mater. You're in a national championship hunt every single year. And then on top of that, because of all those things, you get the best recruits in the country at wide receiver every year because you continue to make 21-year-olds into millionaires in the first round, right? Like, the league is littered with first-round picks that have come out of Ohio State at wide receiver. And so that's a tough decision. I don't know if you're going to get him at the wide receiver position for the coaching staff. I'm willing to bet on somebody like that at coordinator with the relationship he had with CJ Stroud in the past, because they'd worked together before. If I went to CJ Stroud and said, look, I'm thinking about bringing Brian Hartline in to be your offensive coordinator, what are your thoughts on this? And he said, man, I love that idea. Okay, let's go do it. The experience isn't as big a deal to me because my quarterback is in. I'm in a shit or get off the pot year with him in year 3, right? I saw a great analogy when comparing the Texans to the Astros, which was this. If you look at the Texans of the 2016 Astros, there were big changes made going into 2017, right? You brought in veterans. You made some tweaks along the coaching staff, and you had a different attitude in the clubhouse going into that 2017 team. Even the front office made changes in how they viewed talent. They added the human element into it a little bit more after the JD Martinez debacle and misjudging him, and were able to, zero in a little bit better on some of the players that they wanted. And so the Texans are going to have a little bit of that philosophy change. They need some more veterans like a Joe Mixon, right? You need maybe some veterans on the offensive line, some big, nasty, grizzly motherfuckers who are just not going to let CJ Stroud get touched today. It's not going to happen. You need some of those guys who are going to bring what you need in the locker room after a big injury to say, hey, that sucks, but here's what we have to do to be ready to go in 5 days.
Well, think about who this team brought in free agency and or major trade-wise, right? So you had Alshire, you had Daniel Hunter on defense, you had Diggs and Mixon on offense. I would say all of those worked out well. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, Diggs obviously tore his ACL, but he was playing good football up until his injury.
I think for the most part, I could agree with you on that. However, Diggs isn't on the field for a large portion of the season. Alshire has been suspended for the last 3 games, right? Like, there have been aspects of them that have worked out, But, because of Al-Shaair, the Texans kind of have become the bad boys of the NFL, right? And
Yeah,
rightfully or wrongfully so, they've
it did
attained that
go out to
reputation and put some targets on their back.
Danica Autry, missed, a good portion of the season being suspended as well. So, I mean, that one didn't work out. But what I feel like is when DeMeco Ryans and Nico Serio put their heads together on free agents or existing NFL players, for the most part, they're picking the right guys. So they just need to put their heads together on picking, I would say, 2 new offensive linemen. You get a new left guard, you get a new center. I think your right guard, Shaq Mason, is under contract. You're not getting rid of him. Your tackles are under contract. You're not getting rid of them. So you get 2 new offensive linemen, and then you pick one guy to be your number 2 wide receiver. If it's Diggs, okay. I saw enough of Diggs that if he's going to be that Diggs, I'll take that as my number 2 wide receiver. Would you take that over 17 games?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it depends on our offensive coordinator, right? Like,
Right.
if I have a guy who knows how to use what Stephon Diggs is now, yeah, okay. I think part of the problem early in the season too is Bobby Sloak was trying to scheme up plays for 2018 Stephon Diggs, where that's
Yeah.
just not who he is anymore, and he tore an ACL after that. So
Yeah.
Stephon Diggs is a little bit better version than Robert Woods at this point, right? Like
Yeah.
he's a possession receiver, sure-handed, will make some big catches on third down. I think at this point, Diggs is a third receiver. I think your
Yeah.
second receiver we are dying for a Edelman, Wes Welker, twitchy slot receiver. This team is dying for that. With the type of quarterback that CJ is, with the pressure that he gets, if you had somebody that you could just flip it out in the slot real quick, the way the Patriots used to, and just pick up 5-6 yards, that should be your number 2 wide receiver. And then Diggs is my 3 on the outside. I'm happy with that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, Dell was that guy. Or should have been that guy. I mean, he's built to
But
be
again,
that guy.
we are the worst wide receiver screen team I've ever seen in my fucking life. Like
Oh, why are you
there were a
running that
couple
4
of them.
times?
There were a
Running
couple of them where they were actually blocked okay if Nico would have taken it inside and just taken the 5 or 6 yards that were there to the inside. But he kept trying to go outside, and that's just not the way the block was set up, and it kept losing yards. Like, read the fucking block and take it where it is.
Yeah, that play being run 4 different times was just
9. We ran it 9 times.
But in that Chiefs game, I think it was 4 times where they lost yards. 4 for -9 yards.
We ran it 9 times against the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, though that's just sick. I mean, and especially after you've read it that many times poorly against the Chiefs, you got to rip that sucker out until you figure out, okay, how do we run this thing effectively?
Fucking add an RPO element to it. Be like, hey, either I hand it off to Mixon up the middle, or I'm hitting it on the outside for this whatever, or just fucking read the block. I'm reading the block, going take it inside, and he took it outside every time. But Scott, we were talking about the moves the Texans are going to have to make in free agency. The Astros made one, and the city of Houston right now is Walker-ing on Sunshine, as Christian Walker will be the new first baseman for your Houston Astros. Now, this most likely, unless some fucking miracle, means Alex Bregman is no longer a Houston Astro. But crazy as it may sound, I think the Astros infield defense just got better, and let me tell you why. Last year, the Astros were 32nd in defensive runs saved at first base. Christian Walker is number 1 in defensive runs saved the last 3 years. As good as Alex Bregman was, having a great first baseman makes every single person better. We talked about it with how good Jeremy Pena was when he had Yuli over there at first base. We talked about how good Correa was when he had Yuli over there at first base. I think this whole infield, while reshaped, is actually pretty damn good.
So how long were you sitting on that Walkering on Sunshine bit there?
I actually thought of that while we were talking pre-show, and I worked it in there. And I've been waiting to bring that title in. It's the title on the show right now. But hey, yeah.
three things I love about this guy. And the three things you, in addition to what you mentioned. Okay, number one, I don't know if you knew this. I can't remember. No, it was somebody from the board on the crawfish boxes. He is a data nerd. Like he is studying data constantly on hitting. And so this is a guy that, is constantly working on his craft and knows, and he is a low BABIP guy, but when he puts the ball in play, it's usually with damage. Number two, he said he wanted to check out the barbecue scene in Houston. So this guy knows. He knows, what's up. So, but my favorite was his comment. He says, I'd say I have big shoes to fill, but I'm replacing Jose Abreu. And that's pretty ballsy, but, I kind of like ballsy.
The vibe of the room you walk into, right? Like that's what that is. Like, this town is dying for quality first base play. And, hopefully he can give it to us. And again, I don't think that's that bad of a deal. 3 years, $60 million. That's right in line with what you and I discussed on the previous week's episode. And when you look at this infield, Paredes, a guy at third base, should be able to take advantage of the short porch in left field. He was, having a great year in 2023 before being traded to Chicago, a ballpark with the way the wind blows that doesn't really fit him. You've now got Christian Walker at first base, a huge plus over where you were last year. The question still remains this outfield, okay? Because even if you want to tell me that you're going to get some Jordan in left field and Yiner's going to DH some days, you still are going to tell me we're going to trot out Jake Myers, who has shown you at best as a 230 hitter. We're basically saying Jake Marisnik is back, people. It's Jake from Rake Farm. And we're just betting that Chaz last year was an abnormality, and hey, we're going to get the Chaz of old. I think it's a recipe for disaster in the outfield. There's been some rumors. Maybe there's another left-hand bat coming, or maybe there's a left-handed arm, a loggy coming. I don't know. At this point, throw $2 million at Jason Hayward. Throw $1 million at who was the other lefty that we had? Ben Gamble last year, right? Like, I'd like to see. I would be fine if you told me Jason Hayward starting in left field going into the season.
Yeah, or a right field, because he's a a defensive right fielder. And then of course Chaz in left, and because right now your outfield, unless you want to put Bubba Trammell out there, is going to include Dubon. Would you like me to pass you a barf bag, or are you going to be okay with that?
At this point, though, I'd rather Dubon be my everyday starting center fielder than Jake Myers. I don't want both.
Yeah, that's my point. You're going to have both right now. I was going to say about Paredes, he had the number one pull fly ball rate in baseball last year. Right-handed hitter. So I don't think it's outside. I think I looked at the spray chart for Walker. He would have had 9 more home runs in Minute Maid Park based on the balls he hit this year. Now, we've seen this kind of spray chart before. That's how they talked us into Preston Wilson years ago.
I was so amped for that one.
But I think the idea, because Walker missed some time, I think the idea of both him and Paredes hitting 30 bombs, and of course Jordan hitting 30 bombs, is not outside the realm of possibility. So really the question is, can McCormick be a major league average outfielder?
We've seen that he can be. Will he be? I don't know. I could be swayed into one of Chaz or Jake Myers will play every day. Whoever is better will play every day. The idea of playing both is where I have a problem, Scott.
I think I could see where they might have both of them playing and just having a better third outfielder as the other guy. Maybe I don't know that Hayward is technically better, at least if you're looking at last season's numbers. Um, another guy they mentioned in that article I sent you, Jesse Winker. I wouldn't mind him. Um, what I want actually is what I want for them is to sign two guys, whether it's Hayward and Gamble or Hayward and Winker, and just mix and match, just depending on the day, and go with that.
I got a name for you, probably pretty cheap. Can I interest you in one Mark Canha?
Yeah, well, you mentioned me because Mark Canha can also play first base.
And play some first base. He was overall 242 last year, was better once he got to the Giants, was 288 in his final 32 games of the season with the Giants. But he's played some center field. He could play left field, has a bit of pop. Not going to hit you 40 home runs anymore, but he's a guy that is useful. He doesn't have to play every day. You can platoon him. Those are the kind of guys that are still out there that I want the Astros to be looking at, because we're not going to get stars, right? Like the payroll is pretty much set. But we kept a guy like Kessinger on our roster for 2 years. For what? What?
He hit zero.
But you had guys like this that were out there who could have helped us over the last 2 years, right? When we were dying for quality first base play and outfield play, Mark Canha gets released by the Detroit Tigers, and we decided to keep Kessinger instead of bringing that guy in.
I think he was traded to the Giants. I think that's what.
But I mean, either way, there's other guys. I don't know.
Well, my tact has always been that when you're a general manager, your job is to give your manager the best 26 guys you can give them. And you have to look at your manager and how does your manager like to manage? And I think Espada likes to manage a similar way as Dusty Baker. He likes to play everybody on his bench. He likes those YMCA Sunday, every day, everybody plays days. Well, damn it, if you're going to do that, then have a good bench.
Yes.
If
you're going to have a play everybody day and there's still one guy who never plays, that speaks volumes.
I mean, and if you believe that, hey, that's the way to keep my guys fresh into September and October, I mean, there's a defense for that. But you got to have, if you're going to have an outfield that's going to have a bunch of mediocre guys, let's have 5 mediocre guys. Because then at least at that point, you can, mix and match and rotate in and rotate out and, kind of see who the hot hand is. I mean, 2 years ago, Chas McCormick was an afterthought until all of a sudden Chas McCormick became brilliant in 2023. But the problem is that Baker wouldn't keep him in the lineup. What happens if you sign a Mark Canha and all of a sudden he just rediscovers the fountain of middle age and comes in and hits like 270 and has 15 or 20 home runs? Then all of a sudden that guy should be playing every day. But give him a chance.
No, absolutely. I mean, there's guys out there who could come in and help this team. Mark Canha had 2.7 WAR last year. Jurickson Profar is a guy who can play outfield or infield. Is still available.
He might be pricey. He might be a little bit pricey.
He might be, but at the end of the day, he's better than anything we have.
Okay? Oh yeah, no doubt about that.
Tommy Pham is out there to be had. Adam Duvall can play center field. He can play left field. He can play right field. Like these, we're not going to go get the best available talent right now. Santander is not coming here. Teoscar Hernandez is not coming here. But let's go get somebody. Let's bring Jason Hayward back. Let's bring back, Ben Gamble, someone to give us an even if it's just an invitation to spring training. Because here's what I think is about to happen too, Scott. I'm going to throw another caveat on top of this. Alex Bregman's not going to get the deal that he wanted. I don't think Bregman's getting anywhere near what the Astros offered him. I think Bregman's about to take a 1-year deal, and he's going to be back out on the market next year. And the Astros position themselves to look wonderful PR-wise. You already see Dick Face coming out talking about some some teams don't care about leadership and all this other shit after he realized he fucked up.
Yeah, I know. That's a whole hour conversation. But what I would do, Tim, is I would sign 2 or 3 guys who make about $2 or $3 million a year. Because to me, there's a good chance Adam Duvall, if you look at last season's numbers, there's a good chance he's washed. Okay. So you bring him in, he's washed, you cut him. He's making $2 million. Who gives a shit? You bring in Hayward. Let's say Hayward's washed. You cut him. Doesn't matter. So, the worst thing that can happen is that you have these young kids like DeCenzo, guys like that who maybe can play in the corner outfield. Maybe Melton comes up at some point at midseason, but sign some of these guys. I would say at least 2, if not 3, and say, okay, we're gonna have 5 outfielders, and we're gonna rotate them, and we're gonna go with the hot hand, and we're just gonna see what happens.
It would be the logical way to go, Scott, but unfortunately, doesn't seem to be what we're going to get. Let's give some awards away. It's about that time. Who do you have this week as your horse's ass of the week, Scott?
I am going to go with one mentioned before, the National Football League. What are we doing? Christmas Day is a day that's always belonged to the NBA. Let them have their day. You have 364 other days on the calendar. Let the NBA have their day. You can't tell me that you're going to, we're worried about player safety. Bull fucking shit. You're worried about player safety. You're playing 3 games in 11 days. And the best that you can do is you can sit there and say, well, all 4 teams playing the same amount of games, the same amount of days. Sucked for all of them. Ugh. No. If you want the best product, you don't need football every day of the week. We don't need Tuesday night football. We don't need Wednesday night football. I don't need Friday night football. You got high school football for that. You got college football on Saturday. Football belongs on Sundays and Mondays. I would take out Thursday night football. I would take that out. Because to me, you hit the nail on the head earlier in the show and you asked the question, are we devaluing the product? Absolutely. We're devaluing the product. And these guys are not safe. And if I was the players, that would be my first thing is like, you want this 17-game schedule? You want this 18-game schedule? Then let's stop all this playing, all around the week, bullshit. You play Mondays, you play Sundays. That's it. That's all you're doing.
Yeah, could not agree with you more. I was thinking along the same lines, and that's why I brought it up earlier, that NFL is ridiculous. They are hypocritical. They are only in it for the money. And, they had an opportunity to make some extra money from Netflix, and they took it. And player safety be damned. So I couldn't agree with you more. I think my horse's ass is Scott Boras. I mentioned the comments that he made regarding Alex Bregman, the leadership and all that stuff. This guy, I mean, obviously you choose to go with him, you know what you're getting, right? But when your free agency is at the same time as Juan Soto, everybody knew you weren't going to get carte blanche agent services, right? You were going to get backlisted till Soto signs, then we'll deal with it. He wasn't going to give you his full attention. So when the Astros gave you what's a pretty good deal, right? 6 years, $29.5 million a year to remain on a World Series contender for a guy who hasn't quite been at his top game since 2019. That was a fair offer. That was a very fair offer. So you're giving your guy really bad advice. And now watch what happens in the new year where he doesn't sign anywhere near what that contract is. And if he does, it's going to be with a bad team. Alex Bregman's going to sign a 1-year, $32 million a year, then be back on the market this next year the same way Carlos Correa did, because this guy is a fucking horse's ass. He doesn't play it straight with his clients. Teams hate dealing with him. And at the end of the day, one guy gets paid in the offseason and all his other clients get screwed.
Yeah, and I think I was thinking about this. I was taking my dog for a walk this morning, and was thinking, Jose Altuve is beginning the first year of his 5-year deal. And I think, you could compare, I think Jose Altuve and Craig Biggio are very comparable in one respect. Would you agree that they could have made a ton more money elsewhere?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know about for Biggio a ton more because I don't know at that time period the salaries weren't the same. But like Biggio could have gone to a Red Sox, to a Yankees, or whatever, and chased the
I think the
money.
Rockies, offered him
Yeah,
a shit ton.
they did.
And obviously it's proportional, right? Because you're talking about the late '90s, the early 2000s. Money is not as big as it is now. We get all that, but he could have gotten probably 10-20% more
Yeah,
playing
and
somewhere else.
can you think of prime Altuve available on the market? I mean, that's 250, $300 million contract, right?
He would have gotten 10 to 20% more. I think probably similarly on an AAV basis. So that's where Bregman's at. Anywhere Bregman signs, and the two biggest places that have been mentioned have been obviously New York and Boston. And I could see him fitting either place, you know, theoretically. But the point is that if you're Alex Bregman and you're a Boston Red Sox, are you an all-time great Boston Red Sox?
Nope.
If you're a Yankee, are you an all-time best Yankee?
Nope.
I mean, are you even Craig Nettles?
You could. I mean, the only way you become a Yankees legend is if you rattle off 3, 4 championships in your 6 years in New York. That's the only way.
But then if you do that, then you can't say he's Reggie Jackson because Reggie Jackson was the mistakenly best player on those 70s.
It depends on what he does in the postseason. If Bregman goes off, then yeah, he's Reggie Jackson, and that's what it is. But the odds are he's going to be a good piece on a good team, and his best years are behind him. And you're paying for the Alex Bregman of the past, and you're getting an aging veteran whose
I
bat
think
speed is down, who has a history of wrist and forearm injuries that when that happens, he can't get through the baseball and he hits a bunch of lazy fly balls to right field.
he'll end up being a Yankee or a Red Sox. I think he'll be either at or below what the Astros offer was. And it'll be one of those deals where whoever loses out on who they want, whether it's the Red Sox or, the Red Sox have actually sneakily had a really good offseason so far. So to me, if they sign Bregman, I mean, that would be a pretty damn good offseason for them.
I mean, yeah, Bregman's a nice piece. Don't get me wrong. I would have loved to have Alex Bregman back, but I think the offer we gave him was fair. He turned that down, and the Astros cannot sit around and wait till February hoping Bregman resigns. Then what do you do if he doesn't resign and everybody else is gone, right? I have to, and part of the hat tip probably goes to Dana Brown as well for having a backup plan, saying, hey, Alex, you've got till this day to make a decision on this contract. Otherwise, it's going off the table and the money's going out the door elsewhere. I can't sit here and wait for you. You've been in Houston for this long. You know who we are. You know what our pitch is. You know what the culture is. Are you in or you're out? And again, I commend Dana Brown for having a plan. He went into the offseason and said, we need to find a way to keep this window open a little bit longer. Fans may not have liked how they did it, but realistically, this is a competitive lineup, Scott. Like, do we love how all the positions play out? No. But as you said, you've got 30 home run potential with Paredes. You've got 30 home run potential with Walker. You've got 30 home run potential with Yordan Alvarez. You got 25 home run potential with Altuve. You've got 25 home run potential with Yainer Diaz. That's 90, 140. That's 130 home runs between five guys right there. That's a pretty rocking offense.
Yeah, and I think going back to Scott Boras, I think the comments are because the Astros chose to move on. Because the Astros learned their Carlos Beltran lesson from 2004, where we're just waiting for Beltran to make a decision, and finally he makes a decision in, what was it, January, February, and there was nobody else worth having at that point. So the Astros learned their lesson. You can't afford to wait. Boris is using you. He's using you. Don't let him use you.
Yeah. And I'll save the rest of my comment for the hat tips, I guess. I might have tipped my cap on my hat tip. But let's move it over. Scott, who do you have as your hat tip here this week?
So you're going to tip your cap one direction. I'm going to go adjacent to that. And I'm going to tip my cap to Jim Crane. And I wrote an article that got blistered on crawfish boxes because I praised Jim Crane. Because Jim Crane, he's done one thing that no owner in this town, not a single one in Astros baseball history, has been willing to spend top dollar on his team. John McMullen, the first owner that I remember vividly, he signed Nolan Ryan to the first $1 million contract, offered him a pay cut following the 1988 season when all he did, Tim, was lead the league in strikeouts in 1988. Offered him a pay cut. I mean, I can't emphasize that enough. Drake McClain, we've talked about him for years. I'm going to go big and sign Carlos Lee, but I'm going to skip on the rest of the parts of my team.
I'm gonna sign Carlos Lee and then try and convince everyone that Ty Wigington is the move that puts us over the top.
Yeah, I'm gonna let Darryl Kyle walk out of town over $1 million. I'm gonna trade Ken Caminetti because I can't afford him. We're gonna do all these things, right? Drake McClain has spent up to the tax threshold and over it.
Jim Crane.
Yeah, Jim Crane. He's doing this again.
You said Drayton, but Jim Crane.
Okay, Jim Crane. He's spinning over again. He's probably going to go right up to the tax threshold this time around. Estimates are based on arbitration that we're going to come in just under it. Now, did they find a taker for Ryan Presley? Maybe.
Then you can go get another outfielder.
Then you can, get an outfielder in the trade, or you can sign, you can afford to sign some of those outfielders we were talking about with $14 million fresh. You can maybe afford to sign that loogie that you could add to your bullpen. But either way, Jim Crane is spending money on this team. And yes, they traded Kyle Tucker. Yes, they've probably listened on Framber Valdez. And you know what? Framber Valdez might end up being dealt before this offseason's done. And I hate to say that, but the point is that at this point, not in 2022 or 2023, but at this point, it looks like the baseball people are in charge. And so far, I can't quibble with any of the baseball decisions that the baseball people have made. So Jim Crane, you get my hat tip for the week for at least agreeing, to spend money. Maybe fans might disagree with how it's being spent, but you're still spending it.
I'm with you. I think you hit the nail on the head with that last comment. We may not all agree with where the money goes, right? Like, yeah, it sucks we're wasting a ton of money on Abreu and Montero. That is lost money. But at the end of the day, you have put up in a world where it's put up or shut up. You've opened the checkbook and you've spent at the tax threshold. Would I love for you to be the Dodgers and say money's no object? Fuck it, let's go. Yeah, we all would. But the Dodgers have like 6 owners. It's a different scenario. Jim Crane, when he bought this team, had quite a few minority owners that little by little he has bought out. So Jim's the guy. And I think the guy's put a competitive roster on the field. And again, as you mentioned, letting the baseball people be in charge is the biggest part of it. I think the parallel you can draw between owners is between the Houston Texans and the Houston Astros, right? Both for different reasons. The owner either let the wrong people get involved, right? With the Texans, the owner passes away, team goes to the sun, somehow Jack Easterbait gets his hands involved, and shit gets out of control. Well, eventually the owner wakes up. Well, really, his wife fell asleep, and when she woke up, the owner got his ass chewed out. Next thing you know, things get better. Well, with the Astros, it was you had to light $39 million. Jim Crane is wasting $39 million because he didn't let the baseball people be in charge. I think that's a pretty expensive mistake that Jeff Bagwell and Reggie Jackson made. Therefore, I'm going to let my baseball people be back in charge again. Because at the end of the day, let's not forget this guy's a wealthy businessman. They don't like wasting money. Reggie Jackson is no longer an employee of the Astros either. I don't know if we've ever really mentioned that on this show. He's back with the Yankees. And so it seems that the ships have been righted. And so for that, I do agree with you. The Astros, Jim Crane deserves some recognition. Dana Brown deserves the recognition as well, as I said moments ago, for having the plan. Knowing that, hey, we just saw Juan Soto take $760-something million. When you line Kyle Tucker's stats up from 2019 to last season up next to Juan Soto, there's not a lot of difference. And Kyle Tucker's a better defensive player. So while he may not have the name cachet to get $760-something million, I think Kyle Tucker's looking at a $350 million contract pretty squarely in the eye. And we know that Jim Crane doesn't do those. So, hey, I'm going to have a plan for that. I'm giving Alex Bregman till this date to make a decision. If he doesn't, there's a first baseman that I know will love to come to town, and we can make these other subsidiary moves. And hey, our infield defense is just as good, if not better, based on this plan that I have. And I'm going to pick up a top prospect that within a year or two, I'm going to have elite level third base play back again. Okay, let's go make that move. So a secondary hat tip there to Dana Brown again.
All right, Tim. So that is your hat tip?
That's my hat tip. I do want to give a second hat tip. We didn't get to mention him today. Houston Rockets playing great fucking ball, man. Second place in the West right now. 20-9, a half game above Memphis in the Western Conference. Fourth best record overall in the NBA. So while I didn't get to see them on Christmas Day, they did win tonight, and a hat tip is deserved for your Houston Rockets.
Yeah, and so I did see the score at halftime. So they did go on to win that game.
They did go on to win.
Yeah, so they were up big and going into halftime. So I figured they would.
All right, Scott, it's that time. These people have offended us, and they deserve to be recognized as scumbags of the week. Scott, who do you have for us?
I'm going to go with a frequent flyer here. A guy that's been in our crosshairs for, I would say, the last 6 weeks.
Okay.
I'm going to go Bobby Slowick.
All right.
I do have a secondary scumbag that I'll offer in after you're done with yours, if you'll remind me. But I'm sorry, 2 points in their defensive point. You guys shut out. That's the first 31 game that has ended with a team scoring 2 points since 2013. That's just pitiful. And yeah, you can offer up kind of these excuses. Yeah, Tank Dell's injury was horrible. And I get it, and CJ's probably not mentally prepared to play, but you know whose job it is to kind of, build a game plan around who your players are? That's your offensive coordinator. Your offensive coordinator needs to know, hey, my quarterback's just not with it right now. Maybe we need to lean heavily on Joe Mixon. Maybe this needs to be like a Joe Mixon 25, 30 carry game, since, our quarterback maybe is not, mentally where he should be right now. Maybe we have, another running back on the roster, any other running back on the roster that could take maybe 5 or 10 carries if you want to make it a run-heavy game. That would also be a way to maybe take some of the air out of the Baltimore offense. Maybe the best thing to do for your defense is to keep your defense on the sideline. Maybe you do that. Maybe you bring in, your better tight end who's better blocking, which I guess at this point is Irv Smith.
No, you brought back Beck.
Yeah, bring in your best secondary blocker in addition to that line and say, let's go ahead and, let's go heavy and, see what we can do with this running game. And the running game was not absolutely terrible. It's been worse in other weeks, but you just abandoned it. You said, we're just going to let CJ hum it around. He gets sacked 5 times. He overthrows like 5 or 6 targets. It was a horrible day. And it seemed like it seemed like a fait accompli, which is the worst feeling that you can have going into a football game.
To me, it almost seemed like they wrote up both game plans before the Kansas City game. And then they're like, hey, guys, take some time off. We know we got the holidays coming up. Just get both projects turned in before this game, and then we'll have some. It's honestly what it seemed like, right? Like there was no accounting for the fact that you lost one of your most important pieces on offense, and you didn't really have any way to replace it, and you just didn't account for that. So yeah, Bobby Slowick absolutely. I know it's getting over mentioned, but like that should say something, right? Like when you get called out week in and week out on the podcast, a scumbag of the week. You're reaching Ted Cruz territory now at this point, Bobby. I don't think that's where you want to be.
Yeah, he's almost like Greg Abbott territory.
All right, Scott, I am going to call out a group of fans, a type of Texans fan that has called CJ's toughness into question because he cried or he shed tears, when talking about the Tank Dell injury, either in the press conference or it happened on the field. We have a problem in this country when it comes to masculinity, right? You've got people like Andrew Tate. You've got people like Elon Musk. You've got people like Alex Jones who are constantly talking about what a man is and, showing toughness and being ready to fight and kill at all times, to where when we watch something like that happen, I was tearing up. And I don't know Tank Dell personally. I just love the guy as a player and as an alumnus of my university and whatever. That's that man's literal best friend, his best fucking friend. And to call into question any aspect of his character for showing emotion is disgusting, right? Like I already hate that men in general are held to this standard that you have to be, as Tony Soprano put it, the Gary Cooper type, right? The slow, the silent, steady type. When in actuality, like it's healthy for all of us to express emotion. Then we have a quarterback who is struggling and has that happen to him. And while most of the city has done what they can to support and lift him up, there's a loud minority who questions his, toughness or his fortitude because of something like that. And I just think it's disgusting.
Well, and think about it this way, everybody has what they a work best friend. I'm sure you do, Tim. Somebody who you get along with best at work.
I mean, I'm fully remote, and so it's a different vibe. But I mean, I guess there's people who I pal around with, but yeah, like when I worked at the Air Hogs, like we had different relationships. Like I still am in touch with one of the guys. We both have season tickets to Dallas Broadway. We both have kids the same age. We text 2-3 times a week.
And it's literally not a best friend, but it's a best work friend.
Yeah.
And if you can imagine, if anybody can imagine something this horrible happening to a best work, because what you're looking at, I would say probably better than 50% chance, Tank Dell never plays another down in the NFL. I think you'd probably agree with that, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is like, we're looking at like a Bo Jackson type injury right here. And Tank Dell doesn't play baseball.
But 50% because he's had every ligament, damage to his knee. And I saw my dad had that happen to him. He used to referee basketball games. He was refereeing a game when a guy named Larry Johnson was playing JUCO ball. I'm sure you recognize
Larry
the name
Johnson?
Larry Johnson, yes.
Okay.
So Larry Johnson's coming down full board, all 6'7", 250 of them, on one-on-one fast break with a kid, and this kid was like, "I'm going to draw a charge from Larry Johnson." At the last second, the kid's like, "I'm not drawing a charge."
No, I'm not.
So my dad plants to make the call, and the kid bails, and so he hits my dad's leg just dead on, tore every ligament in it. Dad's got an artificial knee. He's had an artificial knee now for over 20 years. That was the last basketball game he ref, and he finished the game. You want to talk about tough? It was back in the days of two-man crews, and so he was permanently at half court. The other guy had to do the hard work of going sideline to sideline because he couldn't make it. But think about your work best friend suffering some kind of a career ender in the middle of a work shift. Are you going to be mentally okay? I'm ready for the day to go on. Let's go. I mean, is that going to be you, Tim?
No, and that's not even a work best friend, right? Like that's his legitimate best friend.
Yeah.
If I was if even if we weren't working together, if my best friend called me and said I just blew out my knee and all this happened and I can't walk and I'm going to be I'm in the hospital for this long, I'm booking a flight, and then I'm a wreck until I'm there to be with them, right? And that's from a distance. I couldn't imagine seeing it.
So, just as a secondary scumbag, Tim, you mentioned the Rockets and how great the Rockets have been doing. I don't know if you saw or heard the Charles Barkley comments during the NBA Cup.
I did not.
He said this team doesn't know how to play basketball. So you're 21-9, second place in the West. Houston Rockets don't know how to play basketball. And do you know why he's making these comments, Tim?
Why?
He's butthurt because he thinks that the Rockets owe him money based on his last year with the team. Like he thinks that I think they have a dispute over it's like $2 or $3 million, and this is like Leslie Alexander period Rockets. I mean, this is not Tillman Fertitta Rockets. Which, by the way, congratulations to Tillman. Did you hear he is going to be the ambassador to Italy?
Yeah.
So I wonder who takes over day-to-day controls of the team.
His son's going to be in charge. I don't love that. I don't love it. But luckily, I already bought my cars, and so I don't have to worry about dealing with it. But I know his son runs all the dealerships, and so his son's going to take over all of his business operations. So it is what it is. But yeah.
But Charles Barkley, I mean, get your personal life out of your commentary. If you look at a 21-9 team that was 500 last year with virtually the same roster, and your comment is this team doesn't know how to play basketball, well, then does any team know how to play basketball, Charles? Are we going to sit there and pull that shit where it's like, well, back in my day, we knew how to play the game? I mean, people have been doing that for years. I mean, that's a tired talking point. I mean, guys from the 60s are doing it based on the guys in the 90s, and the guys in the 30s are doing it based on the guys in the 60s. It's tired.
The game changes, but I mean, it is what it is. One funny little anecdote, Scott, you mentioned your dad finishing out the rest of the game after taking that knee injury. I experienced essentially the flip side of that. I was when I was on the high school golf team, I played for CLBB, Clear Lake Boys Basketball, the rec league. And the ref didn't show up one game. So we had the league president had to fill in as the ref. And he was not in shape to be a game day referee. So he's huffing and puffing. And we had a legit fast break where this dude killed it with a timeout for himself. He yells, my time, as he hustles down the court so he could set up. And then he goes, okay, go. And then we had to restart the fast break so he could be in position to make the call, but stories of the rec league basketball world in high school.
Oh wow, that's awesome! That's awesome.
We had we had one of our confirmation teachers was a referee in that league who occasionally made some calls against me that I was not a fan of. So I would get in Ken's grill on Sunday after our Saturday games, be like, Ken, how are you gonna call a foul on me when I'm all the way across the court and the guy who hacked him was not even near me? Well, maybe I got the number wrong, Tim. It's well, don't do it again. Don't do it again, Ken. Killing me out there.
Oh, man.
But that's going to do it for us here this week. Hopefully everyone had a wonderful holiday. And we will be back probably a Thursday again next week as it's New Year's Day on Wednesday. So Holiday scheduling throwing us off a little bit, but we will be back at it next week, Thursday, and then to our normal schedule again after that. But appreciate everybody who joined us this week. We will be back next week on Born on the Bayou Sports.